Lead and Empower Her with Dr. Julie Ducharme, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant people on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they have learned on their road to success, and get exclusive advice on how to implement their success into your life and business. Lead and Empower Her with Dr. Julie Ducharme is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board and your host, Dr. Julie Ducharme.
Hi, welcome to the She CEO podcast. This is a podcast where I get to interview women from around the world about their unique jobs as CEOs. And I love doing this. It has brought such an interesting perspective into my life about the different industries and women. But we all seem to have a collaboration, something that we find that we're struggling with. And then, of course, I love hearing the aha moments, how we broke the barriers, and so much more. So welcome to this. Before we get started, I want to make sure to recognize our sponsor, Lead and Empower Her She Talks. We have a really great membership where if you want to join a sisterhood, a group that's focused on empowering and education, you can do that through locals.com, and you can see that on the screen. And of course, it'll be in all the links in case you're driving and you can't check it out right now. But you can join for $5 a month, $60 for the year. I guarantee you probably spend more on coffee than you would on this. But I would say that having a sisterhood is priceless. So check that out. And thank you again for our sponsors from Lead and Empower Her She Talks. So today I'm excited to have Tammy Alvarez on our show. She is a CEO of the Career Winners Circle and is also an author, professional keynote speaker, inspirational coach, trainer, and epic storyteller. As an award-winning entrepreneur and a former corporate executive, Tammy believes leaders who inspire courage are at the heart of every successful business. So true. And her spirited, break all the rules approach blends decades of C-suite experience with pragmatic results-based coaching style that helps business professionals create a big impact and love every Monday. Wow, I am really excited to learn how to love every Monday. So let's bring Tammy in. Tammy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It is so great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
I'm so glad you're here. And I'm really excited to learn about Loving Mondays and everything else that you are doing right now. I just feel like this is like the essence of our show. And I think that women who are working to get into where you're at in your career, where I'm at in my career, need to hear these things, because I tell you, Mondays are tough to love. And I'm excited to hear your approach on that. But before we get too far into it, I would really love for you to share the backstory of how did you get here? How did you figure out escaping the career trap? I mean, I think that a lot of women are in that spot and they would love to learn about that secret.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we feel like we're in this soul crushing grind, so let's talk about what the career trap is first, and then I'll back into all the things in terms of how we get here. But if you get that pit in your stomach on Sunday nights, just dreading the week ahead, then you are in the career trap. And you could be working for corporate. You could be a business owner who have fallen out of love with your business, or a victim of your own success. And so the whole point is to really lean in to the things that energize you, that fire you up, so that way you can love every Monday again. And I'll start with the end and kind of back up a little bit in my quick backstory. I spent the majority of my career, 20 plus years, as a C-level executive on Wall Street. And I was a transformation executive. So when all the chaos was happening, my team was running in as everyone else was running out. But I got there in a very different way. When I was 15, my parents divorced. Normal, right? Doesn't usually, no big deal. However, very shortly after that, my mother, my sister, and I were homeless. And we were couch surfing. And at 15 years old, to see what my mother was struggling with had such a profound impact on how I looked at life in general. It just changed the entire trajectory, I think, of my career and my life. And so I didn't go to college after high school. I had no money and no ambition. So I started working. And with some amazing mentors who saw more in me than I did, I was able to navigate this career to ultimately become this small town girl that lived, in a town with more dairy, cows than people, to becoming an executive leading 2,000 people in 35 countries. And the way I was able to do that is because I didn't. And I approached it differently because I had to. Not only did I not have a college degree, but I was the only woman at the leadership table. I was in very male-dominated industries in terms of tech and finance, and usually the youngest. And I loved my career until I didn't. And I remember the death sentence for my corporate career. I was sitting in the boardroom. It was quarterly earnings, and we had missed earnings again. And so the analysts were killing us. It happens every quarter, so it wasn't like it was anything new. But this time, when our executive came in to read everybody the Riot Act, I just remember not caring. And I feel like I had this terminal disease that I call I don't give a shit-itis. And that was a very, very short way after that. 6 months later, I had cashed out of Wall Street, moved to a tropical island off the coast of Belize in Central America, and started this coaching business. Wow. And now I'm talking to you from Mexico City. So we've expatriated again. And learning how to be this entrepreneur was an amazing journey that I can't wait to talk to you about.
Wow. I love hearing about all of this. When you talk about not caring, I remember that happening as well in my career of being 6 months in. I was so stressed out. My hair was falling out. My doctor was telling me that I needed to get out of this job because I was going to die of a heart attack because my blood pressure was through the roof and I was incredibly unhealthy. And I was only 29 or 30 years old.
Oh my.
I remember that moment, like you said, of just kind of like sitting in meetings completely, like just out of it, just thinking like, I hate my job. And, I really admire that you dropped it all and just went. It took me a couple months to actually do that because I was terrified. And I've talked about many times about how it's really interesting how, especially women, will stay in a toxic environment longer than most men, because despite it being toxic, they're comfortable in the sense that they know their job and they're too fearful to leave it. And I don't know if you run into that in this coaching world. I'm assuming you do, but what are some of the things you do to help people who are like, I was terrified to leave. I had 2 little kids. I was like, how do I make money? How do I step into entrepreneurship like you did, in such a way that I'm going to make money and be able to continue to do it?
It's really interesting in terms of, I do have a secret for you though. Men are just as afraid as women. And I've got this even balance of clients, that work with me and our other coaches on the team. They just hide it better. And they don't talk about it as much as we do because we're open to talking to our friends and our colleagues about this. And the way I got out of this, and I think we all have to appreciate and lean into the seasonality of our lives and our careers. So before I had my daughter, I was running like crazy, trying not to end up like my mom, right? That was my goal. And then after I had my daughter, my husband was a stay-at-home dad. I was the only breadwinner. And because I took risks and I was, very much willing to try something new, I've been fired twice. I've been reorged a million times, right? And all these different things. And so I was less willing to take those risks when my daughter was young and I was the only breadwinner. But then once she was graduated college and off the payroll, I'm like, oh, guess what? Now I get to do this again. And so give yourself the grace to be able to know that seasonality, because if you do, like you took a big leap, right? And you took that massive jump, and that's not always for everyone, but you don't have to suffer. Like there are so many ways that you can get unstuck and start to feel that energy again in an environment that, gives you that sense of purpose, but also takes care of the grown-up stuff. In terms of the finance and the benefits. And, let's not call it security because that's a joke. I would bet on myself over a company for job security, any day. But there are just different seasonality, I think, for women in terms of how they want to do that.
I fully agree. And for me, it turned out to be a good thing. I really had to look at my family and my children and think to myself, okay, this is a risk, but, is my health worth it? I have 2 little kids depending on me. And so, that was the real kind of factor for me. And of course, I got some good mentoring out of it. And obviously this was about, I would say 16 years ago, because maybe 17, because my daughter is 15 and a half. Okay. And I think I had a newborn moving into this position, this head position. So I just had a newborn. And then I think my daughter was about 1.5 or 2. So I appreciate you sharing that, and the part about men, because you're right. They don't really talk about that. And it just seems so seamless for them. Whereas women are like, oh my God, I'm terrified of doing this. And I hear this over and over from a lot of women. And I know I stayed in my position way too long. And like you said, I originally loved it. Like I loved what I was doing, but then I got to a part where I was like, I don't want to do this for the next 20 years. And I sure as heck don't want that person being my boss.
Right.
And when I got to be my own boss, it was like, I can never go back. Like, I was like,
Yeah. It's so funny how that works, right? And what I thought was surprising to me is when I decided to cash out and do the tropical island entrepreneur thing. This is the biggest risk I've taken in my entire life. It really was, in terms of I was leaving the big paycheck and the fancy office and the fancy apartment in Manhattan and all these things. And I was taking one of the biggest risks that I thought, like, I'm not going to get worst comes to worst, I'm going to end up on my mom's couch, and figuring things out and reinventing myself again, if everything goes wrong. But what I thought was so surprising is that the majority of my friends would say, why are you giving up? And I found that so surprising because we are so wedded to what should be. Like, this is what I should be doing because this is what I've done. This is the next step. This is what my neighbors are doing. This is what my friends are doing. That if we don't take the time to reevaluate the goalposts and say, what does fulfillment really mean for me right now? Because it's going to be different than it was even a year ago, if not longer. Then what you're going to find is you're running the wrong race. And you're beating yourself up, and you finally get to the finish line, and you look around and you're like, is this all there is? And that's probably because you haven't checked in.
Yeah.
And I had, like, my goals had changed. I was no longer after the big title, the big money, the big all the things. It was about me. I needed to find that balance and that reset because I had had enough, right? 20 years. Yeah. I'm like, I'm good. I'm done. It is time to do something, majorly different. But check those goalposts. Because you might be running a race you don't mean to run.
Yeah, no, I love that. Well, I want to talk about some of the work that you're doing. One of the things is talk to me about what does transforming your apathy into ambition mean?
And so I jokingly say, like, the zombie apocalypse has invaded our businesses and corporate America. And people just kind of shuffle in, they go through the motions, they leave. That's because everyone's, being required to come back to work now. And no one seems to care anymore. And Gallup did 2 studies that I thought were really interesting in terms of the same time period. They did one global survey about employee satisfaction. So how satisfied are you with the company, the work you're doing, stuff like that? That was 80%. Great, right? Sounds really good. Now, the next one was about engagement and how much you love or how much you care about what you do. That number was 25%. So there is this big chunk of people that have fallen into this apathetic haze. And I sometimes think that I'd rather hate or love something versus feel nothing. And we get stuck in this comfort zone because it doesn't hurt that bad. It's okay. But then what you find is if you stay in that apathetic haze too long, now all of a sudden you're marginalized. You're put on the sidelines. You're not making the impact that you've made in the past or that that you can make. And the biggest mistake that I see companies making, which is where this is my soapbox right now, like in terms of the passion that just, because we can fix this, is, if we tie individual aspirations to the company's biggest goals, everyone wins. Now, I'm not talking about how much money, the title, power, span of control, none of that. But why does that human being get out of bed every single morning? And if you can tap into that and use that energy and that excitement and that deep sense of this is what I meant to do and attack the company's hardest problems, all of a sudden everybody is leaning in, company goals are getting crushed, and everybody's winning. But we're not doing that because you can't measure aspirations. You can't take a test. It's hard to do a performance review on that stuff. And, so that's really where the most meaningful, we're doing tons of work right now, but that's, as a result of the book and, kind of getting pulled in from companies, just really helping them figure out how to ignite that unstoppable force that is just lying dormant. And it's so fixable. It is so fixable.
Yeah. Well, as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about some companies like Zappos. I got a chance to work a little bit with Zappos and Google and some of these groups that have these really interesting cultures where they're really making it an employee first company. And they're working, as you talked about creating it where the employees actually feel valued and their aspirations are being met. Zappos was probably one of the most unique companies I've ever visited. I have a picture of me in their ball pit. So when you come in their front door, there's a ball pit. There's this amazing cafe kitchen. Everything is just so, it's so interesting and so different. And I think to myself too, you have to have the right personality to work there, right? I think about our baby boomers and they would absolutely hate this setup. Um, but they really integrate the employees into everything, the hiring process, programs. I mean, they have a bowling alley in there, and it's such a unique approach, but it's been so super successful because they've focused so much on the employees that they've found this massive success. And obviously, that's not going to work for every company, and every person has a different culture. But I like what you're saying about that because it's kind of few and far in between. Do you feel like with the corporations, as much as there's been a lot of work and there's been studies and it shows like if they do this and this and this will be more successful, but I feel like corporate companies are still just not quite getting it with that.
I don't mean to be direct, but that is my nature, right?
Mhm.
They're supposed to, they're doing all the right things, but they don't feel the pain.
Mhm.
Big companies have fungible resources,
Mm.
right? And so it's a nice to have, it's not a have to have, which is why the ball's not moving.
Mhm.
But from a sector perspective, the middle market is hemorrhaging.
Mm.
Like, how can we have all these layoffs and all of these people that are available? And the middle market's top 3 challenge for 2024 across almost every research you look at is the talent shortage.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
where's the disconnect here? And
Mhm.
so I think for companies that are middle market and, and small business, you don't have fungible resources. Everyone has got to be in that boat, rowing in the same direction and focused on where you're headed. And so you don't have the luxury of not working on this and still be able to battle the headwinds that are coming up in terms of the rate of change and all of the things that companies are facing, from tech, from geopolitical, we're in an election year, all of these things. And so I think the middle market and the small businesses are the ones that are in the best position to start to figure out, because it's not even that hard. And I won't even call it culture building because that feels like you have to run an Ironman. Right? When you say culture building, but when you start to make those small changes in 3 areas, how your people show up, right? So when your people start to become the CEO of their careers, they show up differently, right? And so that mindset's very easy to start to change. When leaders learn how to let that new mindset blossom instead of squash it, right? Because it's threatening, then you've got this is growing. And then when your HR team is getting rid of the well-intentioned bureaucracy that's weighing people down in terms of interviewing with 17 people and all the other things that we do to get in our way of success, and start to really tie in the measurement systems into aspirations and impact instead of, in addition to metrics, obviously. These few tweaks that take very little time and just more reinforcement are so much easier to achieve than I think people realize.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, we're getting low on time, but I don't want to skip learning how we don't hate Mondays. What is the secret to loving our Mondays?
Okay, there's 3 secrets. The first one is to realize it's not a pipe dream, right? It's not this elusive idea that only happens to a few people. And I truly believe, and I would like everyone else to really step into believing that loving Mondays is as essential as the air you breathe and the water you need to survive, because it impacts every part of your life. And so once you realize that I deserve this, then you're no longer going to settle. Good enough is not going to be good enough. And when you start to really focus on what are the things that you can do for 12 hours a day and end up more energized than when you started, and how can you play to your strengths more often in your day without making any necessary changes in terms of role, but how can you incorporate that stuff into your day? Then that's the first step to loving Mondays again. But there's a whole book on it, so it's there.
I love it. I love it. And I know we're putting those links up.
Yeah.
So those of you, once again, if you're driving, listening, which I know I get lots of messages from when I'm riding my bike and I'm listening, we'll have all those links in the post as well. So you guys can reach out to those. My last question, which I love to ask, is if you could go back to your younger self and give your younger self advice, what would it be?
I would have given myself advice that I learned way too late in my career, in that I always thought because I was different, because they came through the ranks differently, and I didn't look like everyone else, that was my Achilles heel. And I learned that it actually was my superpower.
That's awesome.
And if I had learned that earlier, I've achieved a lot of successes, but it would have been a lot less imposter syndrome and a lot less heartache getting there, right? So that is exactly what I tell my younger self.
Absolutely. It goes with our theme of be your authentic self.
That's
I
right.
love that. And is there anything coming up, that you want our women to keep an eye out for? Any events, books, any programs you're doing that we can direct them to?
Yep, absolutely. So we are going to be launching in the beginning of Q4 a business women's mastermind.
Awesome.
And so we are bringing in small cohorts. We'll do as many as we need to of those trusted advisors that are coming from the same place that you are based on where you are in your business, and really have that group that you can lean on for professional advice, for networking, for solving some of the problems that you can't go internally to solve. A lot of us at the top spot, we can't go to our teams to solve some of our hard stuff. And so this will be a great opportunity for business owners to come in and really be able to get the guidance and the advice that they need from a peer group. So keep an eye out for that. You'll find that on the Career Winner Circle website, and we're going to start to take applications for that towards the end of the summer.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. And we're so excited because I love just the different perspectives. I love that you talk about being your authentic self and embracing being different. I think that every woman has to find a way to do that. And I love that you're doing that. And for those of you listening, I hope you will check out everything that Tammy is doing. She has some fantastic stuff on her website and also her mastermind that sounds amazing. And as I always say, live, love, laugh, and always be your authentic self.
Thanks for listening to Lead and Empower Her with your host, Dr. Julie Ducharme. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we'll see you on the next episode.